So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Wellness at Work session featuring our Leave for Change panel. Today we have four wonderful speakers from the University of Guelph, representing staff and faculty from all over the University of Guelph that are going to share with you their Leave for Change stories of impact. My name is Evelyn Rogue, and I'm the Senior Consultant in Learning and Development, and I have the privilege of championing and organizing the Leave for Change program on behalf of the University of Guelph. So really happy to be here today to share this panel with you. So Leave for Change is offered in partnership with two international development organizations, WUSC and CESI. They've been around for a very long time, and they created a really unique program called Leave for Change, which offers employers the opportunity to send their employees who have unique skills and talents to send them to developing countries that need support. So it's a partnership really between these two organizations and the University of Guelph, and employees, whether staff or faculty, are able to transform their vacation time, so 3 to 4 weeks is typically how long people go for, into a volunteer assignment in a developing country. And University of Guelph and Uniterra cover the costs of the program. So Uniterra coordinates everything from the training, managing the employees' well-being, and security while there. So just to give you a bit of a history in terms of Leave for Change at the University of Guelph, University of Guelph is proud to have been the first university partner in 2007. And since that time, 70 staff and faculty have gone on Leave for Change, which represents 11% of all Leave for Change volunteers in Canada. And the University of Guelph has sent the highest number of volunteers since that time to 9 different countries. So what skills do you have to offer? Developing countries need a wide range of skills, and our employees have a lot to offer. So you can find out more information on the Leave for Change website about the kind of opportunities that are available through Leave for Change. But it's literally anything from IT support to creating marketing brochures, supporting setting up an inventory management system, healthcare and outreach. And I have yet to come across anyone who didn't have some kind of a unique skill or talent or expertise that they could offer Leave for Change. So everyone has something to offer. And at its core, Leave for Change is really about capacity building. So it's about how do our employees share their skills, their expertise, so that they could advance the organizations in these developing countries. And so there's a number of areas of focus in particular for Uniterra. So HIV and AIDS, prevention, education and care, maternal, child health, basic education, a lot about empowering youth and especially promoting equality between men and women. So today we have a Leave for Change panel for University of Guelph employees that are going to share with you their stories of impact. So the impact that Leave for Change had on them and the kind of impact that they were able to have in their short time there. So we have Claire Alexander, who is the Special Projects Manager in Community Relations at the University of Guelph. We have Clive Compton, who is our Professor in School of Languages and Literatures. Patricia Fleming, who is our Administrative Assistant in Food, Agricultural and Resource Economics, and Stacia Elliott, who is our Director of the School of Hospitality, Food and Tourism Management. So you're going to have an opportunity to hear from each of these individuals about their story of impact. We'll save some time also for questions at the end. And if you have any burning questions for the panel speaker, maybe we'll fit in a question or two in between as well. So first, we're going to kick it off with Claire Alexander, who is our Special Projects Manager in Community Relations. And she's going to share with you her mandate for Leave for Change, which was as the Communications Advisor for Stepping Stones International in Botswana.
Excellent.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. So I participated in November 2014. I took a few years to decide whether I was going to participate. I was really reluctant, wondering if I really had a skill that was directly transferable and that I'd be able to make an impact in 3 weeks. So it took me a long time of thinking about it to gear myself up. When I left, I'd come out of a super busy year, so it was actually an incredible opportunity to take a real break from my work life and my personal life. I signed up for a 3-week session. I had young children, and I thought, that was enough. I regretted that. I wish I'd gone for a little bit longer, because once I was away, I wish I'd had a little bit more time to be there. It's really tough to have an impact in 3 weeks. So that's a little bit about the thought process about applying. I specifically chose to go to Botswana because I'd been to Africa before, and I did want to be somewhere that English was the first language. I felt with 3 weeks, if I had other challenges to overcome, I thought that would make the transition a little bit easier for me. I was the communications advisor for Stepping Stones International, which is a program aimed at vulnerable youth. Loved the program because they were very holistic in that they were working to support vulnerable youth, but they were also providing support in the home, and they were also following up at the school. So they were looking after the whole package of the young people in their care, and they were particularly aimed at older children because there were a lot of programs that were aimed at young children, and there was sort of the feeling that, well, once they're teenagers, there's not that much more you can do. And Botswana is a fascinating country in Africa because it's quite an anomaly. It's a very wealthy country. There is, although it still has a lot of tribal elements, it has a very Western feel for it. Their king in the 70s married a young British woman. And so the current prime minister is a descendant from that family. So it's an interesting culture, which is very different from a lot of Africa. And also the wealth of the diamonds that flooded into that country also created a very unique environment. I've always felt very safe there. I walked around a lot. There were a lot of aspects of living there that I just found so fascinating that they were different from here. Their neighborhoods are, you don't typically have the wealthy neighborhood. You would have like a huge house and then a very small place, because a lot of their property is still handed out through tribal means that you can apply and get a plot of land. But an incredibly friendly country. As a communications advisor, I can't actually remember exactly what my mandate was, because they kind of put in the proposal and then life happens and you arrive and you have a certain skill set, and so you just kind of figure it out when you're there. So what I ended up doing is probably more relevant than what I was originally signed up to do. I did a lot of talking to people. They had been growing, and they had a little bit of breakdown in communication between their upper management and middle management. There was a group of about 25 people. I think there was a picture somewhere that worked there in some of their different programs. They had an education program, a counseling program, a skills and trades program. I think those were the 3 primary ones. And my experience was also a little bit unique because I arrived at Stepping Stones 6 months after a colleague from here at the University of Guelph had just been there. So Stephanie Craig in OAC had been there supporting them with marketing, and she'd created an incredible amount of material for them. So I was aware of what she'd done. I had a really firsthand knowledge of what to expect when I was there. I mean, although you're never really ready for it because it's different, but it was, I felt I went fairly well prepared. And so I had done a number of training courses, HR courses here on campus on leadership and conflict management, and I found I was almost immediately able to just draw on that experience and to share that, and I was able to write back to here and to say, can you share some of the materials that you had? So I wasn't actually having to recreate them. And it's amazing how what you've learned in something, as soon as you can be teaching it to others, how much more meaningful it becomes to you. But for me personally, it had probably been over 20 years since I had just been Claire. I had no children. I had no partner. I had more free time than I've ever had in my life. Although I was working long hours, once I finished, I was watching TED Talks and I was searching the web and things that I hadn't done in ages. So for me, it was a hugely liberating experience. And the opportunity to share things that I had learned, and just honestly, I probably the major thing that I offered was just a neutral ear. I did a lot of talking to people and trying to build bridges and, gain understanding. We talked a lot about the iceberg principle, about, what you're assuming about people and what's under. And that for me personally was, I knew all those things, but teaching them just really integrated them into my life. And I really feel like I came back quite a different person after that. And it was really the opportunity to reflect on what I was doing. And one of the other things I learned, it was a whole new world, this working for NGOs, that I didn't know about. And I think when I talk about impact on me as a person, I think that there will be a time in the future where I'll go back when I have the time to volunteer for 6 months. I had no idea that there were those kind of opportunities out there. I met a lot of retired accountants from Canada that were over in Botswana working with NGOs, and I can see that that's something that I might do in the future that I hadn't even anticipated long term. As for the impact on them, it's hard to know whether in 3 weeks you make an impact. And I would say that was the only thing I felt like I wished I had been able to do more. But I think that they were probably more used to seeing this rota of people cycling through system. So I like to think I made a difference. I don't know. I know that Stephanie produced a ton of material that was like really useful hard copy. And while I was there, they said, can you work on this project? And I thought, I'm pretty sure Stephanie already did that. So I know that as productive as you can be, sometimes if it's too much, it actually, they weren't able to take it in. So maybe the little bits that I did were sufficient. How am I doing for time? Good. So then I just thought I'd share sort of like a typical day of what to expect when I was there. I was working, Stepping Stones was about a 40-minute drive outside of the city. And so I had a taxi driver that picked me up in the morning, and we had long chats about real estate on the drive there. I know a lot about all the different kinds of real estate and housing in Botswana. I drive there. Stepping Stones has quite a few students that are working there, international development students that are working on projects long term, either for a semester or 2 semesters or a full year. So there were quite a few Canadians around. Some of them lived locally where Stepping Stones was, and some of them commuted the same way I did in each day. And then when I came home in the evenings, I was in a homestay. I was staying in someone's house, a woman who worked for another NGO. And I thought it was fabulous because I would come home every night and she often made dinner and just left it on the stove for me. But it was interesting because it was a story I was able to share with people because I thought she was super kind, that she prepared meals, she gave me my space, we didn't have to do a lot of socializing in the evenings. And I was saying to one of the WUSC representatives, like, how much I enjoyed that and appreciated it. And she said, it's interesting, the woman who was there before you, she thought it was super rude. She thought it was so rude that she never saw her, she never interacted with her. And so when I was training at Stepping Stones, I was saying, you see, the same behavior, she hadn't changed, and the two of us had interpreted it completely differently, so that it's not always the other person's behavior, but it's sort of our interpretation. And that was a lot of what was happening at Stepping Stones, as people were making assumptions of why people were behaving certain ways and doing things, and they think they're better than that. It was interesting, but it was a great opportunity to talk and connect, and I would have loved to have stayed longer and continued to support them. So that's kind of the gist of my experience that it was there.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions from the audience at this point for Claire?
Just to clarify, what does the acronym NGO stand for?
Non-governmental organization. So all their funding came from
Outside
outside sources. And one of the interesting things about Botswana is while I was there, they were upgraded from a developing nation. And in fact, you won't find WISP positions in Botswana, which was really tough to see because you could see they were on the cusp of really making a change in the country. They have a significant AIDS problem in the country. And I was able to attend a women's symposium. It was actually my last day. I was flying out in the afternoon and was able to go to that. And they had recently started to shift their focus to say, our problem of addressing the AIDS pandemic is not the problem, it's women's rights. So until women have the right to have more control and more say, they could see it was a problem they weren't going to be able to shift. And in fact, one of the things, the two issues that had come out at the symposium they were talking about is up until the late 60s or early 70s, their constitution still stipulated the size of the switch that you could beat your wife with. So so that's not that long since that had changed. And then the other thing that had become drawn to people's attention were the numbers of orphan children who were disappearing and just being picked up off the streets. And they hadn't previously been aware of that. So all African countries have now brought in, if you're traveling, you have to have a long birth certificate to get into the country or out of the country with a child so that they know that the parents and the children are lined up. So that was a lot of what we saw at Stepping Stones was children who had lost both their parents, were staying with an aunt and uncle who didn't, either couldn't afford really to keep them and it was an added strain on them and they were kind of lost children for that support network, or grannies who weren't able to connect with the younger generation. So they did a lot of mentoring of how to raise the children and how to bring discipline and love. And in the school system, because this is an American NGO, a lot of their approaches to learning were much more positive based and love based as opposed to the typical Botswana, which was much more disciplinarian. And I had the chance to talk to teachers who said, wow, this really building up children's self-esteem really had an impact on the children's ability.
What was the primary language again in Botswana?
English. They have a lot of, I can't remember, they have like 18 different languages, but everybody spoke English. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Claire. So I'm going to pass it on to Clive Compton, who is our professor in school in languages and literatures, and he's going to share with you his experience of serving as a counseling services advisor in Vietnam.
Thank you. I'm very happy to talk about this experience because it was so positive and so changing for me. I went to Vietnam, to the south part of Vietnam, and the reason I was interested in going on this program is not because it was going to be my first volunteer experience, but it was in fact another experience in a long series. Over the years, I have worked as a volunteer in a variety of contexts, places like psychiatric hospitals and so on. In addition to, as you said, my what I do at the university in the School of Languages and Literatures, I'm a professor of French studies there. I have always had a very serious interest in counseling, psychotherapy and psychiatry and so on. In fact, I am a trained psychotherapist and I'm a member of the College of Ontario, the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. So I didn't go into the program, the Leave for Change program, thinking that I would work specifically in this area that I had been volunteering in, but as it turned out, I ended up with what I felt was a perfect match. I chose Vietnam for particular reasons. Vietnam, as you know, was a former French colony up until the early 1950s, so I had a kind of cultural, historical interest in going to a place that had been part of the French Empire a long time ago. So I got given a position as volunteer to go to a small city, smallish city, still several thousand people, in on the south east coast of Vietnam, a small city called Phan Thit. And there's a community college there that's quite large, and it trains young people from that area to work in the hospitality area and tourism. there's a huge, very luxurious resort area close to this city on the coast, the south coast, with beautiful beaches and 5-star hotels. So a lot of the young people in this small place, small town, end up working there. So the college's mandate has been over the years to prepare young people to work in the tourism industry. The college had taken the decision a bit earlier to set up a counseling service in the college for students, a counseling service that would have the two branches that we typically have here, psychological or personal counseling and career counseling. So I went, because of my interest in my background in psychotherapy and counseling, to help set up this counseling center on the counseling side, not the career counseling side. So it was, I spent 3 weeks there, and I worked very hard. I produced a 60-page report at the end of my time there, in which I proposed a format for a counseling service at this college, with timelines of how to set it up and so on. So I think I was pretty efficient and did what I was asked to do. When a couple of years after I was there, and I was there in 2013, July, a couple of years after that, it was about 2 years ago here, the program officer whom I had met in Vietnam was in Guelph, and she told me that the counseling service was up and running. So it went from no counseling service to, within a year and a half, to the existence of a counseling service in this college. So there was definitely an impact in that sense that I was really very satisfied by. The challenges were very interesting for me. When I arrived, my approach was to try and talk to as many people as possible to find out what the concerns were on the part of students, on the part of faculty members, on the part of the administrators who were going to be involved in setting up this counseling service. So I would spend most of my day from 9 till 5 approximately in meetings that were very well organized so efficiently by the college and the administrators in the college, because they wanted me to meet as many people as possible. So I would sit there taking notes, asking questions about what the students' concerns were, what kind of personal issues they faced when they were studying at this college. And I kept all my notes, and then I started towards the middle of the time I was there thinking about how to set up a counseling service. The challenge was to resist what I was hearing from them, which was, tell me how your counseling service runs at the University of Guelph, and we'll do the same here. We'll just use your model. And I had a bit of an uphill battle to sort of say, well, our cultures are different, and from what I'm hearing, the students' issues and problems are not the same. The students' attitudes that I'm hearing here in Vietnam are not the same as the students we have at home, back in Canada. So after a certain point, they accepted the fact that I couldn't just hand over all the documents that I had brought that described our questionnaires, intake questionnaires at the counseling service here, and so on. And then we started working on what their counseling service might look like, and what kind of tools they might use when they were dealing with students who came into their counseling service. But just to make concrete what the situations I ended up in, I'd like to read a little bit of a blog, one of my blogs. One of the really enjoyable experiences I had was keeping a blog. So I wrote every 2 or 3 days and posted a paragraph on what I was doing. So this is one of my blogs, and the title of the blog is Dangerous Fruit. And it's a conversation based on a conversation that I was having with the teachers one day in a classroom in the college. And they had brought some fruit for lunch and so on. So one of the teachers says to me, try this fruit. It's dangerous. And the others burst into hysterical giggling. And one of the other teachers said, she meant to say, it's delicious. So they were referring to this durian fruit, which you might know. It's known in some parts of Asia as the king of fruits. It turns out to be very tasty. It's a combination of citrus, peach, and cherries. Even though the smell is absolutely disgusting, it smells like something rotting. If you know what I'm talking about, if you've had it. It's even more delicious are all these other fruits they had there, which I had a chance to try, such as the dragon fruit. So the third third colleague said, there were a mixture of students and colleagues. So one other person there said, the durian fruit might affect my beauty. And I said, you mean it might make you more beautiful? And more giggling and laughing. And this woman said, no, Vietnamese women think the durian is bad for their complexions. And then the next question was, we don't know anything about you. Do you have any grandchildren? That's a question I had never been asked before in my life. And I guess it made sense because it was a kind of question that was bound to come sooner or later. The question, of course, was a clever way of trying to determine my marital status. And the question fits with my sense of how discreet, modest, respectful these teachers were, and especially in their attitude toward me. So they started telling me stories about themselves, how old they were when they got married. Most of them were in their mid-20s, how many children they had. Most had 2 children. Who does the cooking and the housework? Only the women do the housework and the cooking. Who looks after the children? The women look after the children. And I said to one of the men, do you know how to cook? And he said, I can cook rice with a rice cooker and make instant noodles. So more laughing and fun. So the conversation then turned back to a more serious topic, the one we were discussing in the morning. And the question was, what are the most important personal and family problems that students in the college experience? And a teacher says, one of my students got pregnant, and her boyfriend decided he didn't want to marry her. Her family and the boyfriend's family didn't want anything to do with her, but she wanted to continue her studies. And then the colleague who was telling me this story said, what would happen if that kind of student ended up at a counseling service at a university in Canada? So I replied, well, we'd probably try to find some community services for the student, this young pregnant woman who was not married, and maybe refer to the student to financial services at the universities. We'd get some help there. We'd probably, or through the government, then we'd probably have the student go to the student counseling center if the student was experiencing anxiety or stress around the pregnancy and the issue of relationships with the family and so on. And when I was saying all this, suddenly I was filled with the room who were looking at me with totally blank stares. This was just totally beyond anything that they knew about or could really grasp in terms of support for students, and because there was nothing like that at this college. And that's just an illustration of a number of situations I was in when I would be talking away and suddenly the room would go quiet and people would just look at me as though I stepped off another planet. And those moments were the most precious, I think, for me, the most learning kinds of moments, because they made me realize that one has to be very careful in another culture, especially as a volunteer, in not very cautious in projecting, on one hand, onto them all kinds of assumptions about what they know, who they are, what they're understanding, and on the other side, not making any assumptions about what they might be projecting onto me. So it's the basic issue where I learned so much was in the issue of what we call cross-cultural communication. And I think that the impact on me of this experience was to really heighten and enhance my sensitivity around issues like that. So when I came back, I'm academic counselor, for example, in my department from time to time, and I have all kinds of students who walk into my office from all kinds of places around the world, because I'm in a department where we study languages and cultures, our own and other countries' languages and cultures. We teach Spanish, German, Italian, Arabic soon, Mandarin. So I'm in regular contact with students who walk into my office with all sorts of, from all these different cultures. So I think my takeaway from this experience, the most significant one, was this heightened sense of how important it is to listen carefully, to watch signs carefully, body language and all that sort of thing, in order to communicate in a way that's going to be constructive and helpful for this person who's sitting in front of you. So I think that's
Thank you so much, Clive. Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful to hear about that. Is there one question maybe from the audience at this point?
I was just curious, you had said that at the beginning there was a focus at the college to basically prepare the students to enter the
tourism is industry, yes.
hospitality that was so predominant there.
Mhm.
Has that changed since you've been there?
No, I think it's even more, there are even more opportunities, because I actually visited this on one weekend. I had a chance to go and stay in a very nice hotel in this resort area, and there was a lot of expansion going on when I was there, and that's continued.
Thank you. Thank you, Clive. So next we have Patricia Fleming, who is an administrative assistant in the Department of Food, Agricultural, and Resource Economics. And she's going to share with you her experience as an IT specialist in the non-formal education division of the Ministry of Education in Ghana.
Hi. I'm going to start off by saying I've been listening to the others, and the one thing I've learned from Leave for Change is that everybody I've heard their story is totally different. In whatever place you go to, or what you learn, or it's interesting to talk to others. I applied to be a financial management position either in Malawi or Nepal when I applied, but you submit your resume, and then I found out it was going to be IT in Ghana. So I had no idea. What I applied for was totally different than what they asked me to do. And I was the only one there, so there was no other volunteers there at the time that I was there. And I had, when I found out, I talked to a lot of people at the university that I knew in IT and said, okay, I'm going to need some help here because I haven't done it for a while. And everybody was backing me up, and I went, and when I arrived there, and I had my mandate as to, I was going to help update a website. So my first day on the job when I got there was there was no website. There was no power, probably 3 days a week. There was no, there wasn't anything. Most of them didn't even have computers. So I was thinking, how am I going to do a website? So I just thought, one of the things they prepare you for when you're going on Leave for Change is that you have to be prepared for everything, every circumstance, because, what happens when you get there can be totally different than the mandate that they've provided for you. So the first thing I did was go out with one of the people and purchase a laptop so that we could have a laptop to use to set up a website. And then I had to contact people in Canada to help me, have like a domain to set up a website. And then it went from there. So, it was instant panic at the beginning and the first few days. And I thought, what am I doing? There was lots of tears because I'm in a strange country that I've never been to a developing country. And I had all these challenges, and I was all alone. So then I thought, no, this is the reason I went. I wanted to learn something. I wanted to grow, and the people there were wonderful, and they were all very helpful and wanting to learn. So I thought, we'll just do one day at a time. And I had a very long commute when I first arrived. I had a long commute in which was a trotto that they called it. It was kind of like a van crammed full of as many people as they could get in, which took me almost an hour and a half to get in, and they were hoping I'd be there for 7 in the morning. And then I'd work till 7 at night and then try and take this trotto back. And it would be pitch black all the time. Anyways, just to make the story short, we worked very hard, and by the end of my 4 weeks, I was determined to have a website up, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen till the day I arrived home, but it was very close, and we had 38 pages up on the site by the end of the time. So it all worked out. I had to do a lot of adjustments, and so the impact that I had on them, I think, was great, because they still have their website. They still contact me less and less, because they're learning over the years, because I couldn't teach them in 4 weeks how to maintain a website. I started to show them how to take pictures and upload and do all those things, but it, over the 3 years since I've been there, they, now I just usually phone them and say, I see things haven't been updated for a while, just to, encourage them to keep going with it. And then they go, oh yes, we need to do that. And they do. And I had it was totally different for me there, because we would set meetings to do trainings. But Ghana time is not like Canadian time. Because if the lights went out, then people might not be able to arrive for another 3 or 4 hours. And so meetings that were scheduled for 9 sometimes didn't even happen till the next day. So it was a very slow moving schedule for the most part. And so that's when you just go back and continue your work without, waiting for them. And anyways, because we worked so many hours, the director that I was working for there was fabulous, and he encouraged me to go and do a few other things, which I was very nervous about, being the only one there. But he had a driver that came and got me and actually escorted me all around Accra, which was the capital, one day, to show me the different sites in Accra and to teach me a little bit about their culture. And one of the things that I had was, every time I met anyone, they would say to me, "You're welcome," when I came into the room. And I would smile and nod and say thank you. But "you're welcome" means hello to them. And it took me a while for me to realize that to respond, "You're welcome," yet hello. So there was quite, even though they all spoke English, it was quite, I did notice a big difference in how they perceived women. It was hard for me to fit in to do IT when it was all men in the department, and they were wondering why a woman was sent to help them do IT support. So that took a while for them to adjust and realize that I did know what I was doing and to accept me. And by the end of it, so the impact, by the end of it, I'd made all kinds of new friends. They showered me with gifts when I left. It was very tearful when I left because I didn't want to leave. I still to this day, talk to them by Skype and email all the time. And I think I came home with a whole suitcase of gifts that they gave me to thank me for being there. So it was a real big impact on my life. And I had never thought I would do something like that. And I had talked to other people that had gone on leave for change. And I was really nervous about going, but once I did it, I don't regret a minute of it. Even though it was scary and you get by those first few days, I would do it again anytime that they needed help. And I learned a lot from it. So one of the things that I did when I got home was I realized how much we have here compared to what they have there. and I changed my whole life at home. So it had a big impact on me. I made all kinds of changes with my home life and at work, and based on, needs. And one of the biggest things it did for me at work was we have a lot of foreign students in our department, and it made me realize what it's like for foreign students to come here with their own cultures and not have anybody and not know where anything is and be expected, go and get your social insurance numbers, and they don't have transportation, or they don't know the city, or so it made a huge impact with me on when I see new students now to say, you know what, I've got a car, I'll drive you up there and I'll show you what you need to do. I never would have done that before, but now I get it. Now I understand what it's like to be in a strange country and be on your own. So it had a big impact on me, and I think on them as well. So that was my big trip.
Thank you, Pat. Wonderful to hear another inspiring story. Hard not to tear up. Any burning questions for Pat at this point?
I was just curious, Pat, you mentioned that you had there was, electricity and stuff like that. The resources were so scarce. Did you have any resources to do your actual web development, like GoDaddy or HostGator, or did you bake the cake from scratch?
Luckily, I have a friend in BC who helped me, and he got me onto a software because the computers over there weren't strong enough to download. I was using what I was using here, and so he got me a software that was a real light software that we could download. So on top of developing the web pages, I had to learn a new program at the same time because, we didn't have access to anything.
Has that improved since then?
No, they still use the same software, and the computers are probably 3 more years older, but they're maintaining it. And the other thing is I can still help them now, because from this end I can still upload things for them if they have problems, or that's the thing about technology. But their circumstances I believe, are even worse. The ministry over there is not supporting non-formal education as much. And a non-formal education, just so you know, is mostly for women and children, because they're the ones that work or are at school all day. And so non-formal education is when they go to the villages at night and they might teach out in the open, sitting around a campfire, to allow people that have not been able to attend school. And so it's sad, actually, that the ministry is not stepping up to help this, and I'm hoping that it will change. They have a new government now, but so far it's gone down still. Yeah.
Your dress was very nice, by the way, in the picture.
Oh, thank you. They made that for me.
Oh, wow.
So that was one of the gifts they gave me for, and that's the part that made me so emotional, because they had nothing, and yet they gave me so much. So, they were always supportive and there for me, and that's the part that surprised me the most. And, so it was definitely worthwhile.
You saw that too in Botswana, Claire, right? Having nothing but wanting to give.
Yeah, they were very friendly.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So last but not least, we have Stacia Elliott, who is our Director of the School of Hospitality, Food and Tourism Management. And she's going to share with you her story of being a hospitality advisor at the Saigon Tourist Hospitality College. And she recently just came back from Vietnam.
Yes, in August. I was there July, August 2017. And before I forget to say it, as a follow-up to your beautiful stories, you definitely get more than you give at the end of the experience, for sure. I joined University of Guelph 10 years ago, and I came here because of the tourism program, because for 20 years prior, I had worked in tourism in the public sector in Ontario and in Manitoba. So that was my background. Then I came to Guelph, 10 years of teaching in tourism, researching tourism. I'm inspired to go to the Leave of Change website, and lo and behold, there's this posting, this call for a volunteer to work at the Saigon Tourist Hospitality College, developing curriculum and reviewing curriculum. So it just seemed like such a fit. I was thrilled. From the moment I was accepted, I would say my learning began. Because I'm also a tourism researcher, I began to research Vietnam. I'd never been there. And something I'm quite fascinated with is tourism destination image, and how people form an image of a destination, and that influences whether you select it as a travel destination. So just for interest, I'll share with you my research results of the image of Vietnam. And maybe you've got some images in your mind. Clive has preempted me a little bit there. But they sort of fall into two categories. This is sort of general public image. And one is, I would call, a very general Asian image or association. So everything from tea to temples. The other category is actually quite negative. Things like crowded, or a lot associated with war because of the Vietnam War, which ended in 1975, but I think has been kept alive perhaps through Hollywood films, reruns of MASH, great program, part of my association of Vietnam. I arrive in Vietnam end of July, and I would say it was all of those things and a whole lot more. It is crowded. Ho Chi Minh City is a city of 12 million people, and it's estimated there's about 7 million motorbikes in the city. So everybody goes around on a motorbike. Traffic lights and signs are just kind of a guideline. They really just zip in and out all over the place. As a pedestrian, if you're waiting for a light signal to cross the road, you'll never get across the road. So I was taught the trick of putting out your arm, and that means you're crossing. And you keep your arm out the whole time you're walking, and you just trust that the traffic goes in, and motorbike under your arm, one back here, and you just keep going. If you put your arm down, that means you're stopping. Put your arm up, you're walking. So it was fun, and it seems jarring at first when you arrive, but then you start to look a little deeper, and you realize how everything does in fact work, but at a different pace, a different way. The people in Vietnam are amazing. Their values are around humanity, harmony, family, community. Kind of nice, because I think those align with Guelph as well. And that was what was really very impactful to me, as well as taking my 30 years of tourism experience in a developed country and then going to a developing country. So week one, I did a review of their curriculum, their tourism curriculum. And something that I really strongly believe in philosophically around tourism, whether I'm teaching here or anywhere, is sustainable tourism and responsible management practices in tourism. I'm sure you've seen the stories and the impacts of over-tourism, mass tourism, crowding of tourism. Vietnam is one of the fastest growing destinations. A lot of the associations, yes, there are high-end hotels, but there's a lot more backpackers that come and stay in one-star motels. It's not the best for a destination to obtain sustainability and responsible management practices. So this is what I identified as a gap in their curriculum against Vietnamese government standards of education. So that was week one, working with the faculty who teach in the program. Lots of nods, lots of agreement. Yes, this is good direction. Then that weekend, I got to be a tourist. And I went on a trip to the Mekong Delta, which is one of the most amazing places in the world that I've been to, geographically, culturally. The Mekong is life for that part of Vietnam. It supports their trade, their commerce, everything. I start to see it with my tourism lens. The tour guide picks me up. We drive for almost 2 hours quite quietly, unless I asked a question, whereas in a North American context, if you had paid for a tour, you would be getting some kind of interpretation on the way. So I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of a missed opportunity. I'm looking around as we arrive in Mekong, which is quite a well-known destination, but there's a lack of signage. The parking isn't great. Never mind the toilets. The dock, I'm not sure about the safety. I get on this wooden boat with a local, and then the magic starts to happen. This local tells me about her life on the Mekong Delta. We go across this amazing, huge Mekong River, change to a smaller boat, and travel through these little canals with mangroves touching us on either side. We stop at this little wooden building, which turns out to be a restaurant, and have the most amazing fish. I said, oh, where's this from? They point at me, dumb tourist question. There in the water, and I'm serenaded. They play music and they sing, and it was the most magical tourism experience in a place where, you know, your first gaze as a Westerner might say, oh, the houses, there's so much poverty, there's so many challenges. But the experience was truly magical. So I bring this to then my workshops that I'm to deliver week 2, and speak to this challenge between a tourist's expectations and what is in a destination. But I say that's okay, because one of the tourism trends that people are really looking for is authenticity. You know, you could do homestays. Yes, the homes are simple, but they would be so impactful. I had this beautiful, magical experience. Someone puts up their hand. We've tried that, and it all went really well until the family cooked dinner, and they took a live snake and put it on the barbecue. And the tourists visiting kind of freaked out about this. So all this to say, what I thought I was bringing as a solution, they came back with a challenge, because the context was just so different. And it gave me such an appreciation for tourism. Can be complex to develop anywhere because you have so many stakeholders, you have so many different segments of travelers. But now I'm trying to bring sustainable tourism practices to a place that doesn't even have recycling. Well, they do, in fact, but it's women on bicycles picking up cardboard, or another woman picking up plastic, but they don't have anything that's a system of recycling. And so the challenges were so great. I had to, and now I'm a week and a half through my 3-week mandate, having to step back and kind of reflect and go, okay, now what? Now what do I do? What do I do? And so got together with the colleagues. But actually the story about the snake was quite a turning point, because up until that point, I was just kind of getting nods. Now there was actually dialogue happening. And that's where I learned so much. By week 3, I was bringing examples from other parts of the world, showing them what happens when there is mass tourism and how damaging it can be, and relating to their desire for longevity and sustainability. They are an Asian culture that believes very much in future generations. So I brought in those cultural values with other experiences to share with them the importance of sustainable practices. We developed some PowerPoint presentations that they could take to the students. Wrapped in that was a different approach to pedagogy, which they were also interested in. An interesting thing about tourism, and anywhere in the world, is it's often sometimes taught like you are presenting a brochure, saying, look how wonderful it is, look how beautiful it is, look at the wonderful things we have. Whereas for a difference and change to happen, which they did desire, young people, you have to share the challenges as well. You can't just show the light, you have to show the dark. And so we took some of these approaches into the classroom and had this wonderful, engaging workshop where there was dialogue and They seemed very appreciative at the end to have these resources. So I'd given them essentially curriculum and PowerPoints that they could take into the classroom. Worked with the leader of the tourism program on mapping a course in tourism that incorporated these kind of problem-solving cases as well as issues of sustainability. They asked me to stay. I would have loved to, but I did have to come home to my real world here. But left them a lot of resources and took away just such deep learning about something I thought I knew. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Really powerful and inspiring stories. I'm sure you would agree with me. The power of human connection is just incredible, despite cultural barriers and communication styles and no power and lack of resources. It's just amazing what each of you were able to share of yourselves, despite not having all the resources, but also what you brought back. And a good word you used to describe that was magical. So I'd like to kick it off with a Q&A, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to ask the first question. I feel like I'm on a little bit of a personal mission to reduce the amount of time that it takes people to decide to apply for Leap for Change. Because one consistent theme I hear all the time is, I waited 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 7 years until I felt I was ready. And I believe I heard a couple of you say, you're never really ready, and you really have to be prepared for everything. And I also heard you say you come back as a different person. It changes your life. It's magical. So I wonder if maybe one or two of you could share what would be a piece of advice you would give to someone that is hesitating to move forward, to apply, because they're not quite sure if they're ready or if they have the skills to be able to offer something to a developing country organization.
Go for it.
Patricia.
I would just add, I would just add one thing to that, and that is when I was really nervous about going and what I could do there and whether I would be able to accomplish anything, I was told by another person who went on Leave for Change that it doesn't really matter whether we do our mandate or not, because the people that are there appreciate the fact that you arrived. And so if you arrive and you help them any of the days that you're there, you've helped them, you've changed them. So regardless of being afraid of whether you can do your mandate or do it, everything that Leave for Change has asked of you, you make a difference just by going. So it's to keep in mind that there really shouldn't be any pressure, because once you arrive, you'll develop it. Whatever you can do to help them, you'll do.
Mm-hmm.
My instinct was to say, I don't know if I could have decided earlier. I felt like it was the right time when I did it. But then I thought, what actually got me to that point was I moved from thinking about it internally to starting to talk about it with other people. And I think that that's what moved me from that decision, was actively coming out and talking to people and saying, tell me about your experience. And it was bringing it out into the open that made me say, yeah, I'm ready to go. I can, there's never the right time with your kids or with your work, that it's always going to be a challenge. But I think that would probably help people. The more you can say, stop thinking about it internally. If you're at all thinking about it, come and talk to people, come and get that first-hand experience, because it's very hard to make a decision when it's all just floating around inside your own head. So I guess that would be my advice, is to provide more opportunities for people to connect and leave the door open.
And I would say that if you could find a way to make us be better recruiters, which I'm not sure how you do that, but in my own department, I think I was the first member of my department to go, and I think about 3 or maybe even 4 members of my department went in the years after I went. And it was partly through partly, but not exclusively, through my talking about my experience and giving them a little push.
Certainly I've seen that, which is exactly why I have the panel of you speaking, because I could speak about Leaf for Change, but really when people hear the stories, the challenges that you face, the insecurities that you might have felt, and as well as the energy and what you got back. So thank you for all the work that you've done there. One more question. I know many people on Leaf for Change have had that moment where they think, what am I doing here? Can I actually do this? What helped you to get through that kind of a moment to really have the impact that you did? And how have you brought that back to the University of Guelph?
Sure. Well, this is where I think I was maybe very focused on the skills I might bring, but what turned out to be more important was just that I was acting as a facilitator, or that third-party person to come in and help the organization get to where they wanted to go. And what I was able to bring back from that process is this is the classroom approach. This is the approach to education. It's not that we're that sage on the stage anymore, but we're facilitators. It was encouraging that this crosses many cultural barriers. I won't say all, but many cultural barriers, because I'm in a program where we have a high number of international students. And so I think the experience of being in Vietnam helped me to appreciate their challenges when they come to Canada as students too.
I think one of the advantages that I found is what I brought was not just me, but my world of contacts. And in this world, I mean, it might have been different if I was completely isolated and I couldn't reach out. But like you, Pat, I was writing back home to people that I knew, saying, I got to do this, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. And I had resources that they didn't have access to that I was able to draw on. So it wasn't just about me, but it was about who I could connect to get the information. So that was probably what got me through when I sort of hit a wall and thought, wow, this is a little bit outside of my area of expertise. I had people I could reach out to. So,
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
I just, one of the things that you said is Tatiana, right?
Stacia.
Stacia.
That's okay.
You'd mentioned the word authenticity, and I think that would be a really big draw for someone that could possibly join this or get involved in this, is that, to understand not just what you read in the brochures, but to go and authentically know that in Vietnam it's normal to throw a live snake on a barbecue and that kind of thing. So I would think that would be a real draw, the experiential part of, and the authenticity that you gain and that you understand now, as opposed to just what you read about when you do your research about Vietnam or whatever. So.
And just to loop back to the original theme of this, and it's Wellness at Work Month, and this is part of the Wellness Initiative. And so many of you mentioned, it was a life-changing, magical experience, and you really get more than you give. What would you say about what was sort of unique about this Leaf for Change experience in terms of how it shaped you or changed you personally or professionally? If you could summarize that maybe in a few words.
Well, for me, it was breaking out of the sort of normal routine and the treadmill that I was on. It just allowed me to sort of reflect on what I was doing, where I was going. It was just took me totally outside my comfort zone. So for me, that was, and also just I think like you, Pat, I thought I wasn't sure if I could do it. I wasn't sure if I had the mental fortitude to go into a brand new environment where I didn't have any support structures, and how would I be on my own? And I came back, just saying, I'm resourceful, and I can, so ability to take on new challenges, maybe,
Great.
I think, just to elaborate slightly on what I said earlier, the experience made me it heightened, enhanced, enriched my awareness of myself in intercultural communication situations, especially in situations with young women. I would say. I was regularly, the majority of students at this college, I think, were young women, and so I spent time talking to them, and their stories were really unique, and I think I perhaps listen with a slightly different ear here now because of that experience.
Thank you, Clive.
How it
Patricia.
changed me. Trying to think of. It basically just helped me realize how different people are in the world, and opened the doors to going. I've done a lot of traveling, but not to underdeveloped countries, and it was mostly just getting to know the people over there and how they thought about things, and then comparing it to my home life here, and the advantages that we have compared to what they have, and how it changed my life was, it opened the door to meeting so many new people. I've since met a lot of different people from different places in Canada that are involved with Leave for Change, and it immediately gave us something to talk about because, they had been on that experience as well. So it like Claire said, it just it opened doors where here I felt at work, and I've been here at the university for a long time, limited to what I can do because you're supposed to do what your job performance or states that you do. Where there, I was free to do and teach whatever I wanted to. Whatever they asked of me, I could do. There was no one saying, well, that's not in your job. I felt more free over there. There were no rules, and other than your limits. And so I felt opened up and free. And when I came back here, I realized I need to get out of the box. I need to get out of the box here. I need to make changes. I can do it. I did it over there on my own. I can do it here. And so it just changed the way I thought about things.
Thank you, Pat.
I have
You said
nothing
you want
to add to that.
You have nothing to add? Thank you so much for sharing your time and sharing your stories today. Very inspiring, very touching, and really powerful. And for those of you that will be listening in through video, you can reach out to anyone that's been on Leave for Change. You can find their names on the Leave for Change website. If you search under HR, you can read the many blogs that people have posted, check out their pictures, and really just reach out. So I encourage you to do that, and you're more than welcome to contact me anytime. In HR as well, and Emily Sylvain is the program coordinator for Leave for Change for Canada. So thank you again to everyone.
Thank you.